Welcome to Sounds with Tom Needham, the nation's longest running film, music, and culture radio show and podcast. Today, we're diving deep into the intersection of politics, economics, and governance with a very special guest, Bill Walton. As the host of The Bill Walton Show, Bill has built a reputation for engaging thought provoking discussions with some of the most influential minds in business, policy, and culture. His expertise runs deep. He led the agency action and landing teams for all the federal economic agencies during the 2016 Trump transition, helping to shape key economic policies. With a distinguished career as the former chairman and CEO of Allied Capital Corporation, where he grew assets from 600 million to 9 billion, and leadership roles at the Heritage Foundation, CPAC, the American Enterprise Institute, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Bill brings unparalleled insight into America's economic and financial landscape. Today, we're going to talk about USAID, its mission, its impact, and whether it's truly fulfilling its role in advancing global development and economic growth. Does USAID help or hinder the nations it serves? Bill, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thanks for having me on. Great talking with you.
Yeah, one of the things that I didn't mention in your bio that might be of great interest to our listeners is that besides all the things that you've done that I already stated, you have a background in film as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, one thing that doesn't show up obviously in my resume as much is that before I went to business school, I spent a couple of years in Washington, D.C. and in New York, scuffling around as a wannabe actor. And I did some lighting and stagecraft and various things like that. And then I figured out, I don't know, I'm pretty good at math. I figured out the odds of being successful in that world as opposed to finance. Uh, we're not the same, so I opted for finance. So I've got the love of that art and craft and theater in particular in my blood. And so along the way, I was chairman of a theater company in Chicago when I was working in a bank there, and I was president of the National Symphony Orchestra here at the Kennedy Center, and I was the finance advisor to the trustees of the National Gallery. So the visual arts were all part of my interest, and then I've always been a foreign film and film noir buff forever. Love that stuff, and so it's been a part of who I am, and not So I've got a finance piece, but I guess maybe even my first love is film. And so when I merged my company in 2010, which we had to do because it got pretty badly dinged by the financial meltdown in 2008, 2009. I set out to. I met a. Met, we looked. I looked at producing a film from here in Virginia. Couldn't find a good fit, and in that process, found a guy who became my partner in Los Angeles, Hollywood. He was deep into Hollywood, and so we formed a partnership and set up a production company, and ended up producing three feature films. One was called The Ticket, Dan Stevens, who was the lead in Downton Abbey for a while. You may remember he got knocked off. He got killed in a car wreck at the end of season 3. Well, the reason he ended up out of the cast was he wanted to make movies, and ours was one of the first ones he made.
Oh, wow!
And then also was involved in producing Jerry Lewis's last movie called Max Rose,
Oh, wow.
and that was fun. Now, both The Ticket and Max Rose ended up at festivals. Jerry ended up in Cannes, largely because the French love Jerry Lewis, but also, we'd had the film and it was good there. Got to walk on the red carpet in Cannes, and then also The Ticket went to Tribeca, and so it was one of the top 10 films in the domestic feature film competition, and so that was. So our track record in terms of creating a good product, was good. And then the third film, gosh, uh, Gray, Eileen Gray, the designer,
Hmm.
was. It didn't end up in festivals, but we shot the movie in Monte Carlo and in Ireland and in Paris, and so at least I got to visit some great sets.
So, I mean, it's very interesting that you had this love of the arts and that you actually made some pretty high
Still do.
profile, and you still do.
Yeah.
So what led you then to the rest of your career? Why did you move away from the film?
Well, I did it in 2012, 13, 14, and the issue was we live in Virginia. We're about an hour and a half out of Washington D.C.
Mm,
And you really can't be in the business from here. It just is not. You got to be in Los Angeles or New York or one of the places. There's this clustering factor of talent that you've got to be surrounded by. Hold on a second. Can I put you on mute? Just 1 second.
sure. You are listening to the Sounds Podcast. My name is Tom Needham, and today our special guest is Bill Walton of the Bill Walton Show. And as you just heard, he has an impressive background, not just in politics, but also in film.
Well, thanks. I had one of my terriers was greeting somebody very enthusiastically, so we
No,
got
that's okay. So,
that handled. Yeah, so you've got to be around creative people in the same field. I mean, that's true in Silicon Valley. It's true in Hollywood. I mean, that goes back even to Italy in the 15th century. That's where the metalworkers all clustered in northern Italy, and that was like the mecca for that craft back then. And that's true for New York, Wall Street, like-minded people back when I was on Wall Street. So, and I didn't want to move to LA, so I began here. I began reading about podcasting and listening to a few, and decided that would be a much less. I didn't need to be in LA to do that. And so, and also because of all those other things I've done, I know an awful lot of people in the policy world in Washington. So I had kind of an advantage that I knew people, they were friends, could get people to come on the show. So that's what I've been doing, but I'm still watching a lot of film noir at night.
well, we'll have to maybe talk film again on another episode. But one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show is you do know policy, and I have to be honest, I did not know so much about USAID until these past couple weeks, and now it's all over the news. And I'd kind of like to get into the good, the bad, and the ugly. Um, everything that we can talk about related to this program. If you read different newspapers, it seems like there's different stories. There are people that are claiming that this is one of the greatest programs that was ever created, and there's also the headlines that this is a major scandal and it's finally being revealed that there is corruption and waste and all kinds of issues. So I was wondering, could you just start off by telling our listeners who may not know that much about USAID what it is and what it is that everyone's talking about these past couple weeks?
Well, it was formed by an executive order 40 years ago or more, but I can't remember if Reagan that did it or maybe it was before him, maybe it was Nixon. But it was created with good intentions that we needed to provide a vehicle for foreign aid and humanitarian aid to countries around the world, and it grew over the time. And I think the amount it was now handing out in the last year or so has been almost $50 billion. But then there's the other side of that. That sounds great, but then also, we've also the United States has been involved in a lot of color revolutions, which is where we've gone in and tried to engineer change of regimes, and I might add not to good effect. I mean, I'm sort of in the category of people that thinks we should be doing a lot less of that. Anyway, I was deeply involved in that. There are also some people who think it was really a front for the CIA in engineering these color revolutions. And so over time, became this mix of covert action, I believe, and genuine humanitarian aid to people who, families, children who needed it around the world. And then more recently, in the last 10, 15 years, I think basically since the Obama administration, it's moved dramatically left. It's moved into a woke category that we started promoting programs that were not necessarily popular around the world, but they were popular with progressives here in the United States. And it was part and parcel with the changes at the State Department that was flying gay pride flags at all the embassies, and about 75% of the countries that those flags were flying in didn't support that. And so that was not exactly making friends abroad. So the mission got very mixed. And then it got further. Well, I guess they were trying to drive their agenda, and one of the things that, well, let's back up a second.
Okay.
Trump issued an executive order day one.
Yeah.
So I want to shut down all foreign aid for 90 days so I can figure out where it's going and whether I like that, and whether I think that's what Americans voted for when they elected me. And for the most part, everybody stopped. One agency didn't. At least one of the bigger ones. That was USAID. And so they had Elon Musk working on Trump, and because they were resisting, they said, well, let's go in and take a look at what's happening inside of AID. And they did something that's very, very, it's never happened, which is they went in and they took a look at all the money flows, all the payments that were being made by USAID using all the technology that, artificial intelligence, et cetera, to really map the spending of the entire agency. And in doing that, they found, for example, $9 million of, quote, subscriptions to Politico and to a lot of almost all the other major media organizations. And, the idea that that the USAID needed $9 million worth of Politico is a little far-fetched. And so it looks like that money was there to influence their coverage. And there are even some reporters at Politico that said they were going to do some negative pieces about the Biden administration, and that the senior management told them to lay off it. And so those stories got killed. So there was an effort to advance the Biden agenda, and so so those are all the elements swirling. And then,
well, can I ask you a little bit more just about that for a second? You mentioned that it's been revealed that a lot of money was being sent out to different media organizations, and over the past week or so, I've heard quite a few names thrown out. And I heard the BBC. I heard lots of publications I never heard of around the world. You mentioned Politico. I heard a number of organizations here in America too. And at first it seemed like there was denial, and then people were just trying to say that it was just employees who have subscriptions that need it for their work because they work in Washington, D.C. So there's been a little backtracking and claiming that it's not as bad as it seems, but you seem to be implying that this is pretty widespread, that they're sending money out around the world and even to media organizations in the country, and that it may be influencing coverage. Is that what you're saying?
That is what I'm saying, and I'm only reporting what they found. And I don't think I haven't had a chance firsthand to dig into any of this, but I'm just that is what they found. And of course, the business is supposed to send money and resources to pieces, parts of the world afflicted by conflict and poverty, and it sounds great. But along the way, they went into some other agencies that were pushing. Well, let me give you an example. They spent $10 million on meals that went to Al Qaeda funded terrorist schools. Now, what was that about? Um, they spent about $75 million on diversity, equity, and inclusion, including $16 million for equitable outcomes and inclusion in Vietnam, $7.9 million to teach Sri Lankan journalists to avoid binary gender language. They also $5.5 million to promote LGBTQ causes in Uganda. $2 million for sex changes and LGBTQ activism and sex changes in Guatemala.
Okay.
Now,
So,
what do we? You want me to keep going?
I see some of
The
the
list goes,
examples.
the list
Yeah.
the list runs on and on and on, and so what are we doing? I mean, is that what we want to do?
Well,
We've
what would
got,
you say to people that say that they support those programs and, you know, probably half the, I don't know what the exact percentages are, but there's a percentage of Americans that support these programs and many who don't. What's wrong if some Americans support that, or if the past administration supported it? What's wrong with the money going through USAID the way it was?
well, what's wrong with the money going that way is if they support it, why don't they set up a private fund to fund it themselves directly?
Mm,
I mean, the American taxpayers are paying for this, and if you one of the reasons that Donald Trump won is the cultural issues. And you take a look at things like men and women's sports or the transgender issues or the preferred pronouns. That's roughly an 80-20% issue for most Americans. Men and women's sports a 90-10 issue. And so Trump won with all the swing states, won the popular vote. They won the House and the Senate. So, that's what the American people want, and they didn't vote for programs like these. And so, when you shine a light on these programs, which may have made sense for people who voted for Biden and then Kamala, well, they're in the minority,
mm.
and it's not where U.S. tax dollars should be going. And of course, I don't. I also think U.S. tax dollars shouldn't be going to promote regime change in a lot of these countries, and that's in fact what USAID money has been used for in the past. So I think there are all sorts of constituencies, including me, for shutting us down and getting it down to something that we can all agree on. But having said that, it hasn't really been shut down. It's been moved into the State Department, and now Marco Rubio's, Secretary of State, will be looking over it. And if there are money spent on programs around the world, it'll be something that all Americans think is a good idea.
So, as I said, people have mixed feelings about some of these programs. But the thing that sort of confuses me, again, not knowing too much about the program before the last couple weeks, is why was this all done? I don't know if the correct word is secretly. I mean, maybe if one had wanted to investigate it, they could have found out that this stuff was going on. But why was all of this stuff done through this organization and not really well publicized here?
Well, because they thought that if people knew where the money was going, they would start aiming their political bullets at this agency, and it would come under fire the way it's come under in the last couple of weeks. And so they were able to work an agenda out of the public eye, and that's exactly the way they wanted it.
You mentioned Elon Musk, and that he is going in there, and again, different coverage in different publications. Some people seem to be cheering this on, other people are outraged. Um, how does he have the authority to do what he's doing? And precisely what is it that he's doing? He's going in and being able to track all the money using technology. Is that what you said?
Yes, among other things. I mean, Doge was set up it stands for Department of Government Efficiency, and I'd argue that government efficiency is really an oxymoron. I mean, government's, as presently thought about, is essentially a 19th century institution in the operating in the 20th century, and they've worked with the same systems, desks, and employees, and antiquated computer systems forever. So there's probably a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in those. And DOGE was set up to take a look at where Americans' taxpayer dollars should be saved. And I think that ought to be a bipartisan issue. I don't think there's any question that if there is waste, fraud, and abuse, that everybody on both sides of the aisle would be interested in eliminating that. But the thing that makes this so different and so effective is that, Elon Musk, and there are many other technology people from Silicon Valley who just signed on with Donald Trump. And so there's a lot of sophistication among the people around Trump in terms of their ability to use information systems and artificial intelligence to mine data. So the thing that makes this different is it wasn't just like sending in some auditors with some green eye shades to look at your paper files and decide this or that. But instead, they took a look at they're taking a look at the information systems in the agencies, and they can track where every dime is gone. And a lot of it in USAID went out the door purportedly to other countries, but only to find its way back into the U.S. To people on consulting contracts.
Can you explain that? Like, how does that work?
Well, I'm not close enough to the details to give you a cogent view. I'll give it a try. You send money to do something in Uganda, but it turns out that the money doesn't quite go there. It goes to consultants who helped arrange the money. So if it's $6 million, maybe $3 million of it stays to people who help arrange the aid. And they've and so there's that kind of thing going on in all these programs. And if you look at all the consulting arrangements that we have in the federal government, there's a lot of that going on. And a lot of that consulting money is buying big houses in Potomac. And I don't think that's what the taxpayers are paying for.
The other day, Zelensky was on television claiming that he seemed panicky. he was claiming that he only received like something like $70 billion, or not the hundreds of billions of dollars that were sent over there. I don't know if I have the right numbers, but kind of seeming like he's hearing it reported that they're starting to track the money, and it seemed like he was implying that the money that was supposed to be sent over there was not always getting there. Is this at all related to anything that we're talking about?
It's definitely related. I mean, it's not USAID with that would be involved, but the concept is quite similar. I mean, there's all this money that went out the door, over $200 billion, and we can't account for who it went to. And if he can't account for who it went to, one could only guess that it's also, well, it's not some big houses in Potomac, but maybe some big houses in Switzerland. Remember, Ukraine was the most corrupt country in Europe forever and ever. And, the Bidens are over there doing business the way they were was, really, I thought, stunk to high heaven because of the nature of the business dealings in that country. And sure enough, we send all that money over to Ukraine, and I think an awful lot of it, I'd bet at least a third of it has been scraped by people who diverted the money to themselves.
What do you make of people who claim that USAID is helping people around the world with like disaster relief and helping their health programs and helping with education and promoting democracy? There's a lot of claims saying that they're doing good work and that by exposing this program in the manner in which it's being exposed, it's going to prevent people from receiving the help that they were receiving. What do you say to that?
Well, I think you've got to, in the first place, it hasn't been shut down. Some of those programs which are doing the things you mentioned have moved with USAID into the State Department. So it means that some of the money for some of those programs will still be flowing towards that. And but then the other question, the larger question, really is, okay, we've got all these good intentions. Why should it flow through the federal government that way? I mean, Bill Gates has got how many billions of dollars? I mean, there's no reasons Bill Gates couldn't set and grab some of his other billionaire friends and set up a humanitarian aid program and do this privately. I mean, he's doing that on his own with ironically with vaccines in Africa. So there's no reason this needs to be a federal program if it is just humanitarian aid. But it depends on what you think your functions of the government ought to be. I think you got to be very careful about being in the soft dollar business, which that is.
Mm.
But so and there are all these highlight. They're describing motherhood and apple pie. We're all for both. Maybe
Yeah.
not apple pie anymore. It's not on the. Now Bobby Kennedy probably wouldn't let us eat it. But there are lots of things that sound good, but in the execution, they're not doing any of the things that it purports to do.
Supposedly, Elon Musk is going to be setting his sights on the education department, and other
It's
departments
already
as well.
happening.
Yeah. So, what do you think I mean, I know you don't know for sure, but what do you anticipate he's going to start discovering once he gets into all these different agencies?
Well, I think we'll find out just who's getting paid by the Department of Education. Remember, they don't hire a single teacher. They don't have they don't really create curriculum. They don't do a lot of things that we think of as teaching kids how to read and write. But they do a lot of things like administer programs which had to do with the Biden agenda's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. And so if you're all for that, then Department of Education is doing a lot of good things. But then Donald Trump ordered that DEI will be shut down in federal agencies, and I believe that that's one of the reasons he got elected, whether you like it or not. That's the mandate. So we're gonna find out who has been getting the money all this time. Remember, the DEI has become an industry. I bet if I used to do private equity and used to examine the scope and size of industries. DEI is probably a $5 or $6 billion industry now. And so, we want to know where that money's been going to, and is it on the up and up? And I think also we've got a massive student loan program, and we need to understand how that has been managed. I happen to think the Department of Education should move that loan program into the Treasury because those people over there are far more equipped to deal with something complicated like the student loan program. And Department of Education doesn't have anybody really trained in finance to do that.
So, Bill, there's a lot of changes going on. Are you optimistic or are you nervous about the upcoming years?
I'm optimistic. I really am. I think that Trump is going to have the changes he wants to make. There are going to be fights in the courts, but then we can sort it out there. There are going to be issues with the things he wants to do, not Congress not going along with all of that, and there'll be issues there. But that's all part of the political process. I do think now, though, that Americans deserve to know what their government's doing. And it's all been shrouded in mystery up to now. And even things like saying I'm going to release the reports on the Kennedy assassinations or the Martin Luther King assassinations, which have been kept under wraps for half a century. Why shouldn't Americans know what happened? I mean, and we're a democracy, and so why shouldn't we know what USAID is doing,
Mm,
for that matter? What so these things are, we're living in a society now where individuals don't have much privacy. I mean, the government's got our information, big corporations have got our information. The SEC wants to start tracking, and I think this is probably going to shut down, but all of the portfolios, um, of individuals. I can't remember the name of the program, but that was on the drawing boards under Gary Kinsler. The Justice Department, through the oh gosh, financial crimes
mm,
FinCEN group, wants the ownership information of all the small businesses in America. So of individuals in America, we don't have any privacy, and all the secrecy is in the government, and that needs to change. And I think Trump is doing that. And for me, who believes in more of an open society, I think that's a terrific thing.
yeah, I do agree about that. More transparency, definite guarantee of freedom of speech would be a good thing because that's not really been the case in recent years. Those two things alone would be a big change. Um, Bill, I really enjoyed speaking with you, and I have a feeling people might enjoy your show, the Bill Walton Show. Can you give everyone a sense of where we can find your show and other work that you do?
Well, it's at the Bill Walton Show on YouTube, and also on Rumble, and also on all major podcast platforms. I've also got it on Substack, which is a really robust practice, app there, and it also handles a lot of text, and I'm threatening to do some writing on Substack as well. So you can find me there. Uh, and then, of course, I'm doing a lot of interviews, and I've just hired somebody that's terrific to help sort those out, so they'll be out in public for people to listen to. And you mentioned before we started talking about how your audience is likely to be not necessarily Donald Trump voters, but I do think there's a case to be made that there's a lot of stuff he's doing, particularly in the privacy area, that everybody should support.
Yeah, it's very hard to tell what people really think politically. Long Island voted for Trump um, overwhelmingly, so you wouldn't know it though before the election necessarily. So it's confusing, and I think there's things that people like about him, and there's things that they don't. But it's an interesting
That's
time
easy.
period that we live in, you know. But either way, I mean, it's so fascinating. And then like when he brought in, you know, Tulsi and Elon and Robert
Bobby
Kennedy.
Kennedy. I mean,
Yeah,
look at
I mean,
that. Who
I
can
think,
match Kennedy?
I mean, he brought in a lot of like, traditionally liberal people. I think it's confusing for a lot of people. So it's very fascinating what's going on right now, whether one
Well,
likes it or
because
not. It's really it's amazing just
one
to
last
follow it.
point, he's something that I am not. He's not ideological.
Mm,
He's talking about common sense. And when you get into something like that, there's an awful lot of things that you can agree on if you strip out the ideology. And I don't think he read Descartes, or all the John Locke or things like
right.
that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So I think it's an exciting time, and he's breaking a lot of things, but a lot of things deserve to be broke, and he's going to build some things, and I think that could be good. But yeah, I like your questions, and hope we can, maybe we'll do something else in the future.
I would love that.
Uh, t-
Bill, thank you so much. And I want to recommend to everyone check out the Bill Walton Show and have a great day.